All right. Wow. RSPCT, a little bit of timeless and apropos music. Hello and welcome. Thanks for joining us for today's discussion. My name is Ed Hartman, and I have the pleasure of hosting you today. We have a packed agenda with incredible speakers, great content, and the opportunity for you to ask your questions for how to create a safer, more positive gaming community. We're also going to share our inspiration for today's title for the webinar. And a spoiler alert, it all began just a few short months ago at GDC, but more on that later. Let's take a look where some of our audience members are joining us from. I can see Medellin, California, Denver, Nashville, Bulgaria, Athens. It's amazing. It's a great, great international crew. And thank you everyone for joining. As your host today, my goal is to make this session as interactive as possible. Starting now, I'd like the audience to go ahead and drop questions into Q&A. There's a Q&A button on the far right-hand lower portion of your screen, and you can upvote your favorites. It could be your question. It could be someone else's question. And we'll do the best we can to have our panelists weigh in and address any of your questions. All right. I'll give you a moment to locate that Q&A button and start putting in a few of your hot topics. All right. Many of you tuning in already know that social interactions are increasing dramatically. And with this, some challenges. Players and members can cross over the line from trash talking to bad actors. The more imaginative among them can create bots. They can post words and content that create a toxic environment for communities. Players can be harassed. They can have offensive comments posted and or spam attacks. And all of that is just with words with friends. Moderation is effing hard. But today we're going to do our best to share some actionable insights and suggestions. So you can see our agenda. Everyone can take a moment to look at it, and please continue to put your questions into Q&A. It's our opportunity to engage the audience and make sure that there are some things that we cover that are top of mind for all of us. All right. So moderation is hard. We'll look at the inspiration for the webinar title and why game moderation is not for the faint of heart, but is critical to protect your players and team members. Then we'll wade into some deeper waters, hearing from our special guest, Nate Sawatzky, Trust and Safety Lead at Supercell. Man, how did they get this guy? The studio behind one of the most popular, massive, multiplayer online role-playing games, Clash of Clans. We'll explore moderation strategies, genre, different challenges regionally, by age category, as well as the challenges of scale. And fingers crossed, against an epic moderation fail, we'll hopefully leave time for audience Q&A. Finally, we hope to leave you with some key takeaways, all in about 45 minutes. So it's pretty action-packed. Let's get ready to not rumble. All right. At this time, I'd like to welcome to our screens today, Sharon Fisher, Head of Trust and Safety at Keyword Studios, and Kayla Jarvis, Trust and Safety Specialist at Two Hat Xbox.
Hello, everyone.
Welcome, Sharon.
Thank you. So
how you doing?
Kayla. There she is.
And here's Kayla.
Wow. Hi, everyone.
Terrific. Well, how about if we start with Kayla? We'll go alphabetically. Kayla, tell us about yourself and your role at Xbox Two Hat.
Thanks, Ed. I'm so excited to be here today. Just looking at all the people joining from across the globe. Thank you for joining. Amazing. I live in Canada. I have a family. I have pets. Beautiful place to live. But what we're all here to talk about today, of course, is what I do professionally. Not me, what everyone does professionally. I love my job. I get to work with amazing companies that care deeply about their community, about their audience. Some of them are here to minimize risk. Others are looking to optimize opportunities, and working with them every day to help put their goals into action is what I love most.
Thanks, Kayla. Sharon.
Hi, I'm Sharon Fisher, Head of Trust and Safety at Keyword Studios. Come from 12-ish, a little bit more of years of experience in gaming. Started a long time ago in the moderation space, making sure kids were safe in the internet back at Club Penguin. And that's where my passion for moderation started, just making sure that everybody was okay. Back on the time was kids. Really quickly, we realized that there was everyone that needed to be safe online. Went from there to work at Two Hat, a tool that does this kind of filtering. Then I came to Keywords, and it is my pleasure to be here with you, just sharing how effing, I wish I could say it, I want to say it, how effing hard is moderation. If you're in moderation, you have heard or read worse thing than the F word, but we'll keep it clean for reshare. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Sharon. Thank you, Kayla. So to set the stage for our conversation, I think it's great to start with our inspiration for the webinar title. We're going to show you a clip from a recent Community Clubhouse event at the Microsoft Reactor Space in San Francisco last March. We gathered players, player experience professionals together with panel discussionists and networked during the GDC 2023. This is a clip to set the stage for our first panel, The Power of Community, Keeping Players Engaged, Connected, and Safe. And let's go to the videotape.
What are the wider challenges you experienced, and what are you doing about those challenges?
Moderation is hard. Players.
Amen.
Players. I like to call them.
You're muted, Ed.
As you can see, it was muted out. At the panel, we had Christina Camilleri from Netflix, and I believe she's with us today. So thank you, Christina, for joining us, and thank you for being our inspiration. on the panel, we also had her peers from Small Giant Games and Barrio Network Studios and so on. And really, when the F-bomb came out, we were all laughing. Right? Those of us that were there were laughing because we completely agreed with Christina. It is effing hard. And love to get your thoughts. Why don't we start with you, Kayla? What's your immediate reaction?
That it's so true. It is really, really hard. And I think in part the reason being is there's so many things to consider. You have on the governance side, you have your brand, you have your legal compliance, you have regulations, you have government, all of these things nowadays that you need to think about. But you also need to consider, most importantly, in my thoughts, is your community. What is the goal of your game? What do you want to accomplish? What tone do you want to set? And then how do you get there? It's not a silver bullet when it comes to moderation. There are so many different things to consider and to think about. Do you want to just, as I said earlier, mitigate risk, or do you actually want to positively engage with your community as well? All of those things are happening at the same time. So it's hard, effing hard.
Effing hard. Sharon?
Moderation is effing hard because it's human. I think that's the best way that I can explain it. We humans are complex beings. We're going to be evolving. We're going to have good days. We're going to have bad days. And with that, we also have to live within certain rules, in this case, platform rules, gaming rules. So we all have biases too, as the other side on the moderator, superhero side of things. So there's so many elements right now. The one piece that I'm excited and scared and always hesitant about is the fact that moderation is a thing now. I'm excited because, yay, we don't have to convince people anymore that it is a thing. I am worried about it because with that comes huge responsibility, obviously. And no matter what, nowadays, thankfully, all voices are to be heard. So if you say yes to one piece of content, somebody's going to get back at you and going to push back. If you say no, the same thing, because voices are now out there, and that excites me. But it also brings another layer of attention that we need to really look into when we are making decisions. So it is hard, but it's possible.
Thank you, Sharon. Thanks, Kayla. Audience, please stick around, because at the end of today's session, we're going to share the rest of that clip from Christina. And hopefully, because Christina's here, we'll be able to bring her on the stage. Christina, if you're down with that, and maybe have her provide a little bit more color commentary. Although that, her Netflix and Christina could be a hint, a future webinar topic as well. So, all right. Let's find out from the audience what their biggest challenges are with gaming moderation. So if everyone would take a look for the chat portion, it's the far right, lower right purple box. The question is, what's your biggest challenge in moderating content for your communities? Is it content volume, number of channels? Is it global issues? Things like managing multiple cultures, languages, and time zones? Is it prioritizing community needs and getting engineering input and support? Or is it something else? So love to get some conversations going. And again, these are things that can be served up to Nate, Kayla, and Sharon. So again, let's make this as interactive as possible, and things that are top of mind, let's share them. All right, Josh. Hey, I can see Josh already. Josh is not a shy guy. Thank you, Josh, for being the first one into scaling. Josh says it's scaling moderation while maintaining quality of service. Wow, that's a pretty thoughtful and experienced answer. Well done. Anyone else? All right. I'll give some more time for the audience to put some other comments into the chat. As well as any Q&A questions, because now it's time. It's time for our thought leader spotlight. I'm pleased to introduce our special guest. You know, when I ghosted Nate's website, I discovered that he once helped launch a virtual world for kids called, Sharon already knows the answer, Club Penguin. Since then, he's worked for some fantastic companies like Starbucks, Disney, Facebook, Tiny Speck, Two Hat, and more. He also attended university and received a Master of Science in Cybercrime and Digital Investigations. And he's currently steering the safe gameplay for millions of players. No pressure, Nate, in all the worlds created by Supercell. So let's give a virtual high five and all the emoji love you can muster for Nate Sawatzky, Trust and Safety Lead at Supercell.
Hey. Hey, it's really good to be here. Sorry, there's a bit of a sun flare that's moved in, which in Finland is a pretty awesome thing. It's been a long, dark winter, so the fact that there's a sun flare in there, I'm just going to let it sit, because that means that I'm enjoying some sun for a change. Yeah, my name is Nathan Sawatzky, and I lead the Trust and Safety team here at Supercell. We are a Finnish game studio responsible for the games Clash of Clans, Clash Royale, Brawl Stars, Heyday, Boom Beach. And yes, I think I got the job at the beginning. You were wondering how they got me. It's simply because I look like a barbarian. I think that is that's really my secret. Look like the characters of the studios. There's lesson number one in today. I'll start off by maybe just kind of taking through a little bit of my history, what got me here, and then we'll get to the questions and stuff, because I think that's where the real fun stuff is. Who doesn't want to look like a barbarian? Oh man, yeah. Well, some days it has its perks. I scare kids. Actually, no, most kids actually think that I'm Santa Claus. So it's not often that I'll get kids come up and they think they're being really funny, and they are being really funny. They'll say, "Ha, Santa, Santa." Anyways, I started not ever wanting to go into business. That wasn't my goal at all. I wanted to be a musician. I wanted to be a rock star. I may look like a rock star more so now. I'm not really trying to pump myself up too much, but trust me, whenever I was wanting to be a rock star, I was very much not cool enough to be a rock star. And so I studied art, I studied theology, and I ended up accidentally stumbling into a studio that was just about to launch a virtual world called Club Penguin. At that point, I had 5 of my 6 kids. So I think they thought, hey, you like kids, you must like kids. And I had worked at Starbucks and I had managed a Starbucks and I loved that. And I'll talk about Starbucks in a second. So they figured maybe you know what to do. And at the time, really, we didn't know what Club Penguin was going to be. The idea was that I would take care of the support and the occasional moderation needs. And maybe at some point we would need to bring in another person or two to kind of help with that. And if you know anything about the story of Club Penguin, it grew very quickly. Within 3 months, I had hired 20 people. Within 6 months, we had hired 80 people into the moderation team. And the team would eventually grow over the course of the time that I was there to be well over 200 people that were focused on the care, safety of players, talking with players. We had phone calls, so kids would actually call us and talk to us. It was pretty amazing. Sharon, you would have had the chance to talk with kids. Club Penguin was a really, really great experience. I had no idea what I was doing back then, so I had the opportunity to grow and learn. I think some of the key lessons that I learned while I was at Club Penguin was, moderation is hard, but it was really an incredible experience, and it was really fulfilling. And it was really important because kids were attracted to the online spaces. They wanted to be able to engage in this new technology. They wanted to be able to share a piece of themselves, and they wanted to explore different parts of who they were, right? They didn't just want to be themselves, the kid that they were at school or the kid that they were at home. They wanted to try out a character. They wanted to role play. They wanted to see what it was like, sometimes to be somebody really cool, sometimes to be a little bit more outspoken than they would have been, sometimes to be a little bit more friendly than they would have been, sometimes to be interested in something that they didn't feel like they could say they were interested in the physical spaces. But also, sometimes they wanted to see what it was like to be bad. They wanted to find out what it was like to say something that they had heard on television, or they wanted to try out being a little bit violent or a little bit edgy, not because they were bad kids, but because it was a place where they could do so in a way that didn't feel like it was that harmful. And it turns out adults do the same thing. We still are trying to figure out how to act in a space where that level of accountability isn't quite there. I think another major lesson that I learned at Club Penguin was the importance of the culture of our moderation. The team that we had there, I think it remains one of the coolest teams that I've ever worked with, right? Everybody through the whole organization, people really, really cared about what they did. It was not uncommon to walk onto the moderation floor and hear people in a very rousing debate. In fact, we had this part of the training, we called it Rules of the Roundtable, where we actually kind of taught rules of rhetoric and dialectics so that people would debate what they would see. They would see a piece of content and say, hey, I think this is a bad piece of content. And rather than kind of just following a really strict set of rules, people would debate it. They would have good conversations, and then they would make a decision, and we would try and capture that conversation for the next group that would come in so that they also would get the benefit of that conversation. But I think that culture was really important, and a highlight that was early in the days of Club Penguin. We had a morning team and we had a night team, and they were continually kind of growing apart a little bit, which was the first time that had happened at the studio. We had grown to a certain size and people were starting to feel distance from the people who they didn't work with directly. So the night team, they spent a couple days working on a cardboard pirate ship, because in Club Penguin we had this character called Rockhopper, and so they built this big cardboard ship, so that when Morning Clue came in the next morning, they got to play in this cardboard ship, and then they left cookies, and then it kind of went on for 2 weeks. Every night, the night crew would come in, and there would be gifts from them, and in the morning, there'd be something added to the ship, and it was cool. And I share this because moderation is really hard. So it matters who you're doing it with, and it matters the culture that you're in, more than I think most other jobs. Anyways, lots of cool stuff happened at Club Penguin. After I left Club Penguin, I had a chance to work with Chris Preeb, who I had worked with at Club Penguin, and he had started up his own company. And Kayla and Sharon have both also been there. Kayla, you are there. Sharon, you were there in that. It was Sue Hat, Potty Mouth at the time we were called. And a fun story, we used to have a business card that had a dirty toilet on one side and a clean toilet on the other. Yeah, I know. Everybody's shaking their heads. Love you, Chris. But hey, that was an amazing time because this was like new tech, right? There wasn't a lot of companies out there that were trying to build a business around keeping people safe online. And I remember when Chris and I went to the first GDC that we went to together, trying to convince companies that they needed some tools, that they needed some way of thinking about it. Man, it was hard. People would look at us like, I don't get it. What do you mean? And now, now it's everybody. It's on the front of everybody's mind. It really matters now. And I went to an event in London a couple of weeks ago, and we were at the top of the Shard, and it was this classy event all based around online safety. Nothing like that existed back in those days. Two Hat was a really good lesson in trying to figure out how we think about technology that's going to impact the way that we do the work that we do online. And it was the genesis of thinking about how technology would take a bigger and bigger role in the way that we think about caring for online communities. I'm taking probably a little bit too long, so I'll speed up a little bit. From Two Hat, I had a chance to work at Facebook, and I got to see what doing this sort of work at scale, as we like to say at Facebook, what that meant. And that was a crazy adventure. I thought that I had seen some stuff working in children's moderation, but working on a social media platform at scale, that was really something. And my heart goes out to everybody who works on that kind of content, because that's tough stuff. Anyways, long story short, I did a few different things in between Facebook, did some consulting, moved my family over to Europe, where we have lived now for the past 6 or 7 years. We love it over here, and now here I am in Finland. Supercell is a really cool company. Our games are really popular, and I feel like I'm one of the very fortunate people in the industry. A lot of people, whenever I talk to them, they ask, like, how do you convince them to grow your team? How do you convince them to get the budget? I'm lucky. I have a company that deeply values the work that we do, and obviously we have to be responsible. Obviously, we still have to fight for resources, but it's a gift to be able to work at a studio that understands how important this work is, and I feel a tremendous amount of support from them. And I guess in the Q&A, if anybody is interested, I'm really happy to talk about the way that we're structured and the way that we work. But I don't know, Ed, I think that's enough for now. Back to you.
Excellent. Excellent, Nate. Thank you. Thank you. That was really great content. And the gauntlet has been thrown down by Nate. Ask away. Let's get some questions in QA. We've already got some starting. I've got a couple that I'd like to start off with, though. And Sharon, we'll start with you. When you look at moderation, is there an ROI associated with content moderation? I mean, is it just we need to brush our teeth, it's a good thing to do, or is there an actual business benefit as a studio from a business perspective?
I think the benefit is definitely there. This is the $1 million question that we all trust and safety people are trying to prove within the organization. So how do you measure ROI can go from the time and the length that people is staying within the game. But overall, creating a healthy community, it is almost like this La La Land that you are trying to just provoke and make sure that people that is there is engaged, and they can just be free of sharing their thoughts without like being scared of doing it, right? So the ROI to moderation is still to be defined, and I will talk that very specific to my use case, and on my knowledge, I will definitely let Nate speak more into it. But for us is making sure that reports are not up there. That means that everything has been set on a really good way. Reports are kind of like the rash. You have to look really into what is provoking all of these reports. That is a good sign. And then when people is contesting their bannings very often, that's also a very nice way of looking into your community and be like, I either have to change a little bit of my terms of use or my engagement rules. Am I being too much? Am I being too little? There's a few flags there that you can look into.
Nate, I'd love to get your perspective, right? As Supercell, does Supercell look for an ROI, or are they concerned about impacts in game or community toxicity?
Yeah, I mean, in squishy ways, we care about the ROI, right? Like we know that a bad event that goes viral is a bad thing for our business. We know that a bad event that happens to an individual person is bad for that person. These are all true. We've put it on ourselves to try and prove this out, though. Our hypothesis, and everybody on this call knows this, we're pretty sure that there is an actual business case for what we do. We're fairly certain that we're important in churn. We're fairly important in how valuable people see our games. So We're kind of working on a year-long project right now to prove that out and to try and find what the right metrics are. And when we have that, that's something that we intend to share. So, we'll put that out there, and hopefully if we can prove it out, then, that'll be a resource that other people can use as well. Smaller studios can use to kind of prove out that it's worth for them too.
Nate, thanks. Kayla, I'm going to throw this next one over to you. You've got trash talk, and then you've got toxicity. You have, how does a studio or a content moderator know when it's a problem, when they need content moderation, or when something has crossed the line, activity, or something's crossed the line from simply trash talk to toxicity?
Yeah, that's a great question, Ed. And I think it comes down to, as a company, as a game team, really understanding and digging into your community guidelines. So what is your intended behavior in any given game? And we know across audiences, ages, genre, that's vastly different. An example in a first-person shooter is, I need to kill myself so I can respawn. But if you're in a kid's game and you're talking about that, perhaps it's very different weighted, right? So you have to consider all of those different things when it comes to moderation. And even on top of that, if we're talking about one specific game, perhaps you have different areas of communication. You have a lobby chat or a global chat. It's the first impression that people get when they enter into your game. And if that's, a fun environment and a welcoming environment, even if there's a little bit, hey, I'm about to get you in this game, that might be okay. But if you're seeing really abusive and harassing things right when you enter that community, it can be very jarring and shocking, and it can definitely cause people to leave and not engage. If you're in a clan and you know each other, trash talk is part of the game. It's part of the fun. It's what people like, hey, yeah, whatever. But even there, if it gets abusive, if people are spewing hate speech or other nasty things within that environment, then you want to be able to protect from that. But it comes down to your core beliefs as an organization, as a game team. What is our intended outcome for this community, and how can we get there?
Kayla, thanks. Nate, let's just pretend we're going to play a pretend game. You've gone to a new studio. Maybe it's an independent. Maybe it's all the way up to Quad A. It's your first day on the job. What do you do? How do you start?
Right, the obvious answers is, trying to understand the problems. But I think as far as like some of the universal things that I think need to happen, I think getting the right people around you is critically important. Finding people and bringing them internal if you can, if the studio is willing for you to be able to bring on people. If not, finding some key partners externally to be working with, people that you trust, people that you can do work with and produce really good things. Finding champions inside the studio. One of the best things that I did when I started, and it was at the advice of my then lead, was to just go and sit with all of the game leads and start to build that trust, help them understand why I cared what I cared about. So, being able to convey the why behind what we're doing and helping not to scare everybody, right? The tactic wasn't to go in and say, did you know that there are this many pedophiles that play the games? That's not a winning tactic whenever you're trying to convince a game team that you're going to need their resources and their partnership. But helping them understand why having healthy societies within their games is a meaningful thing, how that enhances the game and the experiences that we've had in the past. All of that starts to build a condition in which you can then start to make the asks and say, hey, we've got this idea, this thing, that if we implement it, it's going to have this sort of impact, or we think it's going to have this sort of impact, and we want to try and prove that out.
That's great. Okay. Anyone want to bring up another topic that I haven't touched upon, or expand upon what Nate shared? Maybe something around one size fits all. What does it mean if I have a global game? What concerns should I have around culture or language, time zones? What channels should I consider? Any of those?
All of those.
All right. So Nate, start with channels, right? You have an in-game channel. What other channels should I concern myself with?
I mean, at the end of the day, for me, it's always first to go for what's in game. That's always going to be the most important thing, right? The health of what's happening in your game will bleed to what's happening outside of your game. So there's obviously channels like Twitter, and a lot of studios use Discord, and there's Reddits and all the other things that happen outside of the game. But the priority, I think, has to be inside the game first, and making sure that is an important thing. And I think the biggest piece to that is setting those expectations for the people that are in your games, helping them understand what is expected of them. What does good look like? So community guidelines that are not just kind of kitschy or not just overly legal, but that actually kind of grab the attention. But then finding ways to help reinforce those, right? So we work with our community team, and the community team and us are trying to find ways to not just tell them this is what we expect of you, but here are some things. Here's the way that we're acting to model what it is that we want. We're highlighting people that are acting that way so that you understand this is kind of really what we're looking for. So.
That's good. That's good. Thank you for that. Anyone else? Kayla, do you want to chime in on cultural differences? Or I think Emily mentioned time zones.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in part, if you're looking, as Nate said, to work with third parties, making sure that they're trusted, you can have human teams across the globe. Of course, keywords can help with that. You can have technology as well that can be operating and augmenting what you're already doing, not just trusting it all to technology, but remembering the human factor of it as well. And if you work in multiple time zones and you have people and technology that can work across the globe, then you can help mitigate a lot of the risk. I do hear oftentimes, particularly with younger companies, perhaps it's their first game that they're launching, that is a big concern for them. They don't have the capacity within their team to provide coverage 24/7. So what's going to happen in those off hours when the community is left to run rampant and do whatever they want if they don't have technology or humans to help on the backside?
That's great. Sharon, you've got a pretty big team. What are you looking for in team members? What are the skills? How do you hire and train and retain your superheroes, your content moderators?
We are definitely doing it in a very different way. Since trust and safety has been established at Keywords a year ago, we identified that first off, we need to definitely have the right people for the job. What it looks like is very different from other BPOs. It's not just how quick you can click. That's not a characteristic. How you can speak English on another language. That's not also a characteristic. It's making sure that, number one, you are okay receiving help. That's a good one. Like, hey, you're going to be doing this. Are you okay going to counseling? Certain times we need to make sure that we're able to protect people. Bias, it's another one. So we all have biases, no finger pointing here. We have been raised in many different ways, countries, ideals, and all of it. How open are you to listen to others, right? Again, when it comes to moderation at any time, but more so right now, it is important that people understand that we all come with bias. It's okay. But how open are you to understand what's happening in Manila, what's happening down south, and not just understand it, but listen to it and try to even learn it. That's another side. I think the one piece that really shake me when you said one size fits all. That's definitely the opposite of moderation, as we can all tell. Supercell might have an idea of it, but maybe each of their games needs something different, right? And it's same company, but because of regions, because of the mechanics of the game, because of the audience, what I find, especially now that we're developing new stuff on moderation, is you really don't start from scratch any single time. The process is there, but you definitely have to adapt and pick from the different pieces that you have learned through the way.
Thank you, Sharon.
Customized, if something.
Thank you.
To perfect fit, yes.
Dimitri has a question. It's been the top upvote, so I'll read it. What's the best practice working with users reporting other users other than investigate every case manually? How do you automate it? and even parts of that process. Nate.
Yeah, so we use a few different ways to do this. A huge part of this is the way that we use Community Sift. Community Sift helps us prioritize content based on how risky that content is and based on the sort of content that it is. We also are using internal signals to be able to boost particular sorts of content. And one of the things that we're in the early stages of exploring right now is how do we find longer forms of harms? So one of the biggest challenges is, maybe Sharon and I are online and maybe I'm being not particularly nice to Sharon, but nothing that I'm saying at any given moment would rise to that threshold of if she were to report me, then a moderator would look at that content and say, that's it, that's the problem. So we're looking at how we use AI, machine learning, to be able to detect longer forms of abuse. And that would extend to things like child sexual abuse content, as well as extremist content. That stuff is much more difficult to find and, oftentimes won't easily kind of be surfaced by a report. Sometimes it is, but it often takes more investigation. And so that's where we need to use technology to help amplify it. But that felt like a cop-out. I don't feel like I answered Dimitri's question very well. I think right now we're on the cusp of technology making this a lot easier for us. But I think right now the bulk of the work still is just what you're suggesting there, and that is a user reports another user, and you try and be as sophisticated about that report as possible and use as many signals as possible to be able to amplify the serious reports. And then you just train your agents to be able to look for the things that make them go, hey, I think there's something more here.
Thanks, Nate. Scott's next in the block. Thoughts on how we can best block users that create new accounts constantly after bans? Kayla, do you want to jump on that one? Sharon, Nate, I turn it over to you.
I think this is Nate 100%.
Yeah, I think we largely accept that it just happens. I'm not sure that we're doing anything particularly sophisticated. IP bans is difficult because we're mobile games, and so there's a lot of people share the same IPs, or if people are at school, and we like the fact that kids would be at school playing Brawl Stars together, for example. So IP bans don't make a lot of sense for us. Christina suggested that there's device IDs, and we're exploring that as a way to be able to do that. Truthfully, I think we just kind of swallow the pain of it and just continue to find the bad actors or find the disruptive people.
Thanks, Nate. All right, the next one's from Josh. Questions with the ever-looming conversational AI. How should we communicate to clients the importance of adapting the strategy where it comes to content moderation in a world full of auto chat GPT bots?
The thing that scares me please go ahead, Kayla.
No, please. I'll answer after you.
All right. I'm more scared about how the bots are going to be tuned to cause harm. Right. I think the thing that scares me the most about AI is that a bad actor can create a finely tuned piece of artificial intelligence that's able to gather signals from across the internet to target an individual with no remorse. I know that's dark, but I think we've got some dark days ahead of us. I love AI. I think it's going to be cool, but I think it's also going to be painful. I think that right now, everybody's trying to figure out what they're going to do with it, how they're going to use it. I think it's creating a lot of potential harms because, are you banning an AI bot, or are you trying to ban the person who's creating the AI bot? I think we need to have a lot more conversations around this as an industry and start putting together people that are far smarter than I in a room to start cracking down on this and figure out how we're going to create meaningful policies, meaningful technology, and to some degree even meaningful legislation. But
Nate, that's great. All right, last one I think we have time for is Christina. Christina, how do you balance appropriately moderating abusive content with overly censoring your community? That's a great question.
It is a good question. And I think it comes down, from my perspective, is finding that right balance between expressivity and expressivity and safety. And it depends on your community. Do you have a U13 community? Are you an adult community? What's the genre of your game? Going back to the other example that I used in a first-person shooter, you need to kill yourself to respawn. That's perfectly fine. In a under 13 or that more maybe tricky tween and early teen group where they're really looking to push boundaries. We talked about that at the beginning with Club Penguin and really wanting to test limits, try on new skins, as it were, try new things. Finding that balance for that community can be quite hard. They're going to come back because they're allowed to be able to be a little bit different, but where's that line in the sand on what's safe and harmful, and how do you do that? Within SIFT, we do it by looking at each sort of topic of conversation, things like sexual content, hate speech, bullying, vulgarity, and looking at each of those topics and then deciding for yourself as a community, as a company, as a game, where do we draw that line? Where's the slider go?
Kayla, thanks. Well, team, we're almost out of time. So I just, I want to go around. We promised some key takeaways. So what I'd like you to do, I'll start with Sharon. Sharon, if there's one thing that you'd like to impart upon our audience today, the one actionable thing that they can take away from today's session, what would that be?
I think that moderation is based in transparency, and transparency comes in both ways. If you are able to share with your audience what is that is expected, what behavior is it appropriate and what is not, I think that also links a little bit with Christina's question, where it's like, how do you create that balance? You just tell people what goes and what doesn't go. There's going to be always those gray areas, but through transparency, communication, people knows what's expected and what's not, and then you enforce based on it. Always taking in consideration that we are humans and moderation is 100% human, with the help of tools that allow you to get there at a faster time.
Thanks, Sharon. Kayla.
I put it in the chat earlier and I stole it from our good friend, Oscar Clark, but trust is magic dust. He said that at the conference at Reboot. And it's true. And it can guide you in every facet of your organization and your community and your game. Building trust with your community, listen and respond to them, engage with them, be accountable and hold them accountable for their actions as well. Be humble, have humor. All of these things that you're building, you're humanizing, as Sharon said at the beginning of this. Connections are a human thing. And so if you can create those connections and do so from a place of trust, then you are well on your way to having a very positive and engaging community.
Thanks, Kayla. Nate, bring us home.
Yeah, I love that we use the term community so much because it speaks to the good-hearted nature of people that work in trust and safety. But one of the things that I would say is I think it's also helpful to sometimes not see it as a community, but as a digital society. And as the world is so increasingly global, we have people that play our games that would never actually be in community with each other. In fact, they could probably never really sit and have a meaningful political conversation or a philosophical conversation or even an ideological conversation without getting into a fight, which is too bad. I hope as society we become better at that. But I think for me, one of the biggest things that we're thinking a lot about is when we think about our policies, our technology, how do we create something more like Switzerland within our own internal operations, where we're trying to make it a place for everybody, even people that have beliefs that we don't really agree with. And I think social media walked down this path first, and it was an incredible experiment to find out if counter speech would work. And I think we have learned a lot from them, and some of the things they did well, some of the things they didn't do well. And I think that we ought to be looking at that and trying to figure out how do we build that technology to create space for people who, are on one side of the spectrum versus the other side of the spectrum. How do we build tools so that they can take care of themselves? How do we build tools so that they can be part of the conversations they want to be part of? And how do we intervene in the places where real world harm or where vulnerable people are potentially at risk?
Nate, thanks. Thanks. A friend of mine recently shared he was warned for dropping the F-bomb in a chess online game. I think it really is. I think Kayla touched upon this, and it's about having standards and guardrails. So notifying your team, your players, as well as your team, what the standards are, and holding your players accountable is the key. So using the garden analogy, if you don't have a vision for your garden, it's going to quickly become, and take action, it's going to quickly become overgrown. Well, I did promise that we'd watch the rest of Christina from Netflix's video, and we do have just a little bit more time. So if I could, we'll bring Christina onto the stage and we'll share her video.
You experienced, and what are you doing about those challenges?
Moderation is hard because players.
Amen.
Players, I like to call them creative, and I'm sure some of you have heard of TTP, but
TTP.
Yes,
That is my favorite acronym.
I won't elaborate, but players always find a way to
Yep,
make
they do.
things
Time two.
awful.
Yep.
Moderation is hard because there are so many different angles that you have to come and deal with it from. There is the proactive side of moderation, so putting tooling and detections in place to make sure certain bad words don't appear on your platform. There's the reactive side of enabling your moderators or people working for the company or your tooling to remove content after. But I think what we don't think about too much is game design and game system design, and how we can harness that to foster and build a safe community from the start. So instead of just relying on removing or prohibiting bad behavior, how do we build a game that really enables good behavior?
Yes.
So an example I like to use is some games just throw you right into open text chat when you start playing the game. Like Among Us, for example, you go in, it's competitive, and there's open chat. It's going to be a bad experience.
What could
guaranteed.
go wrong?
But maybe if we readjusted, and this won't work in all games, but maybe you have to play a certain amount of times, or maybe you have to reach, a certain rank before you get open text chat, and maybe you just have a limited can chat option for until then, can help sort of lower the amount of abuse you're going to see or lower the barrier of entry.
Wow. Christina, you're a star.
Hi, how's it going?
Thanks for joining us. Do you have any closing comments for today's webinar?
I guess I'll say one thing. Well, first, thank you, everyone. This has been super insightful. I've learned a lot. It's nice to hear so many voices across the trust and safety community. One thing I love to talk about in moderation specifically is the importance of safety by design. So I think we've built this industry to focus a lot on reactive moderation. So how do we filter and get out the bad stuff that we already see in the community and in our games? But I'd love for us to shift a little bit more to how can we design features from development to be safe, to have the appropriate self-serve tooling, and to be designed and built in a way that abuse may be less likely to happen in the community. We have this in some of our internal game studios. Spryfox is one of them. They're really focusing on, how can we have our members earn the trust and build trust with members before we throw features like chat at them or voice chat at them. Like, let's build trust between two players or within a group of players before we give them access to certain features. That's just one example of how to do it. But I really like that the focus on more safe design tools and systems in games rather than just trying to pull out the nastiness in games.
Well said. Well said. Nate, anything to build on what Christina shared?
No, I agree with it fully. I think she's right. I think, I can't say it better.
Yeah, I believe Josh, who's on the line as well, echoed those sentiments during one of his sessions as well. And team, I'd like to say that this is the beginning of a webinar series, and just like with Community Clubhouse, this is a conversation, and I see this as the first of many of these webinars. And Christina, I think you could have your own 1-hour session, and I'd love to kind of put you on the spot and get you to buy into that. So teaser for everybody else on the line. that they have more content to look forward to. Are there any other questions that we haven't addressed? I think we have a couple minutes left. Let's see. Emily has a question that did well. How about community moderation can encompass a lot, as we know, with hiring third-party or contractors for global coverage. Have you ever had to go through the obstacles of figuring out how to provide more benefits or room for growth for contracted employees?
That's a good one. So it is a lot to manage. I think what I can talk about, Emily, is like my side of the fence, which is we're the third party that people is hiring. And the way that we try to do it is we're not a third party, but we're a partner. And this is not a commercial for my company, but just giving you a little bit of insight into how I believe the industry of services is switching, where we understand that you have a day job that you have to continue to perform and you're already overwhelmed. So what we're trying to do is taking a lot of pieces from you. Hence why partnerships with third parties like Two Hat, for example, are so important to us, because then instead of having Emily going into Two Hat and switching things, you have our team taking care of all of that. We work together on your vision of community, and then we just make it happen for you. Nobody has time to like learn new tools and maintain them and all that. So I think that's where we are trying to help more on your side. When it comes to contracted employees, I think it's also something that is shifting, and we're seeing more and more of our clients going that way because of the economy. And it is also a tough topic, I will say, because as we know, they do not have the same benefits as everybody else. So it is something where I usually go on my end of the fence and do more of the learning opportunities for them, obviously as many other benefits, but building them with the knowledge. So at one point they can either become permanent or can get even a better job of what they have currently. So that's how we are like trying to support our contracted employees internally.
Terrific. Well, I don't have any more questions. Unless the audience has any more, we're going to close this thing out. I want to thank the panel. Wow. Well done, Nate, Kayla, Sharon, Christina. Last minute, very fortunate to have you join us as well. So thank you very much for your insights. And I'm going to ask Kent to bring up one more slide for the team. So it's time, and we're at time. So please visit us on LinkedIn, the individual company websites, and we're going to continue this conversation along with other topics related to player experience at our upcoming community clubhouse. If you're going to be at Cologne, Germany for Gamescom, it'll be the Tuesday, August 22nd. So if you're traveling there for the conference, make sure that you look for us online, scan that QR code, make sure we get you an invite. I think if I remember correctly, Kayla, how many attendees did we have at Gamescom? Wasn't it?
Oh my gosh, we had to limit it. We had like hundreds and hundreds registered, and we had about 100 for capacity.
Yeah, and so you see it right there. Take a moment, scan that QR code, and we'll make sure you get that invite. And again, thanks to everyone for their time today. I thank you for your questions, for your feedback, and this recording will be available and shared with all your teams, all of the attendees, and we'll continue this conversation. Thanks for watching, and see you again next time.
Thank you.
Closing time, open all the doors and let you out into the world. Closing time, turn all of the lights on over every boy and every girl. Closing time, one last call for alcohol, so finish your whiskey or beer. Closing time, you don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. I know who I want to take me home. I know who I want to take me home. I know who I want to take me home. Take me home. Closing time. Time for you to go out to the places you will be from. Closing time. This room won't be open till your brothers or your sisters come. So gather up your jackets, move it to the exits. I hope you have found a friend. Closing time. Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end. Yeah, I know who I want to take me home. I know who I want to take me home. I know who I want to take me home. Take me home. Closing time. Time for you to go out to the places you will be from. I know who I want to take me home. I know who I want to take me home. I know who I want to take me home. Take me home. I know who I want to take me home. I know who I want to take me home. I know who I want to take me home. Take me home. Closing time. Every new beginning comes from some other beginning.